When we were plotting GDP per head and mortality using matplotlib, we had some trouble finding a color scheme that would allow us to distinguish all the countries in a clear way. Yeah, because there are quite a number of them, and then finding a color scheme that distinguishes these different countries clearly is pretty hard. So one way to solve that is to actually make an interactive plot. And here I'm going to show you making an interactive plot using altair. Yeah, so altair is a plotting library. There are a number of very good introduction videos on YouTube. So if you Google on Python altair tutorial or something, you will see a couple of them. There's also a DataCamp introduction to altair. So I'll run you through the code of plotting our countries with log GDP on the horizontal axis and log mortality on the vertical axis. So the first thing is when we did our merging of the data, we had two year columns, and then pandas renames one year X and the other one year Y. But when we make this plot, of course, we don't want year X on our axes. We simply want to have year. So we rename the column year X in the data frame to year. Then we're going to specify a selection tool. So it's called select year. I'm going to come back to this later on where we actually use this. But basically, so we're importing altair as alt. So there is this selection single function, method, strictly speaking, in altair. So there are a number of different things you can do, but here we use the selection part. The field is year, so we're using the year column of our data frame as the field. We're starting in 2011, and you can specify the range over which year goes, and it goes from 2011 to 2017 with steps equal to 1, and in this case, unlike most Python range specifications, 2017 is actually included. Yeah, so usually in Python when you specify a range, it's excluding the endpoint, but in this case, as you will see in a second, 2017 is actually included. I'm going to add a couple of new columns to our data frame. We already defined these as variables in our analysis above, but we never added them to the data frame, so I'm going to do that now. So in the data frame, of course, we have GDP per capita. And the thing I want to plot is log GDP per capita, so I define a new column, log GDP. Similarly for mortality. So again, we're looking here at treatable mortality, and we specify a new column, log mortality. And we specify a column gender, where we have, instead of F and M, we actually have female and male. Yeah, you will see in a second why we're doing that. So now we can specify our figure in altair. So we start with saying that we want to plot something, so chart is the method here. And we want to plot our data frame df. The thing that we're going to plot is basically a scatter plot, so we have points. These points are going to be filled. Yeah, so you can also have open circles. And the size of these points is going to be fixed at 50. Yeah, you can also have the point size varying with a column, for instance, but we're not going to do that today. Yeah, so we specify the size of these points at 50 here. And then we get this encode method, where we're going to tell altair what we want to plot exactly. So first of all, on the x-axis, on the horizontal axis, we want to plot the column log GDP. Yeah, so this refers back to the column in the data frame log GDP. We can specify the label of this x-axis, and then in altair this is called title. So this is the label on the x-axis, GDP per capita in logs. We can say something about the scale at which we want to plot this. So basically we can specify that the scale will go from 9 to 12. Yeah, so remember this is in logs, in log dimensions. Yeah, so this is similar to specifying dimensions in matplotlib plot. So similarly we do for y. So on the y-axis, on the vertical axis, we have log mortality. We can specify a title and we can specify a scale. Then the color of the points that we're going to use is going to be country, and the column is going to be gender. So we're going to have two columns, one for males, one for females. And this is going to be our big improvement over matplotlib. The tooltip, when we hover over this, over these points, is going to be country. Yeah, I'm going to show you in a second how that works. So then we configure the axes. We don't want a grid, so we specify grid false here, but try for yourself at home what happens when you specify grid is true. Then we configure the view. So the stroke width you can specify equal to 0. I've out-commented this to show you what it actually does. So at home you can try what you get when stroke width equal to 0. And now we're going to add our selection. And the selection is going to use this select year thing that we defined here. Yeah, so here we defined what select year does. So it selects a year, and I'll show you in a second how that works. So that's the thing that we're using here. And then you use this transform filter on select year and interactive. And basically you can save this figure as an HTML file. So now I'm going to show you what that looks like. So here we have the figure. So here you see our select year, and it basically allows us to select the different years. Yeah, so we start at 2011, we go all the way up to 2017, and 2017 is included in this case. So we have GDP per capita as label on the x-axis, treatable mortality we have on the vertical axis. This is what happens if you don't specify what happens to your stroke width. If stroke width is equal to 0, this thing actually disappears here, this sort of box that you can see. So here we have gender, and we have two columns. So one is the relationship between GDP and mortality for females, and the other one is for males. As you can see, we have different colors for different countries as we specified, and here we have the legend for that. But of course it's very hard to distinguish Austria from Greece or Belgium from Hungary, yeah, because these colors are basically the same. But now if we use our mouse and we hover over a point, it actually tells us that this country is Malta, this country is Spain, and this country is Portugal. Yeah, so that's the nice thing of an interactive graph. You can hover over these points, and it will basically tell you what these points mean, which countries they are. So you're not fully reliant on the colors. You can actually use simply your mouse and then see what these different countries are. So the end product is basically an HTML file which you can view in any browser, but which you can also include in other things, in presentations or on your website. It's simply a block of HTML code, and you can include it basically everywhere that you would like to use it. Yeah, so this was a quick run through on how, when you have a figure with lots of different, in this case, countries, you can generate an interactive plot so that you can make sure that it's clear for the reader or for the watcher what all these different points mean.